To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. Jonathan Mannion is today's guest, and he's a dear friend. He's one of the country's most acclaimed portrait photographers who in his 25-plus year career has shot over 300 album covers, probably ranging from Jay-Z to Aaliyah to DJ Khaled. He's photographed probably over 500 plus of the most influential artists, athletes, actors, designers, and tastemakers within our culture. And before he goes deeper on his journey, I would love to get your thoughts, my friend, on our key question. And when you hear culture, what does that mean to you?
You know, it's very interesting because I've been in this game for 30 years. So like what culture meant 30 years ago versus my understanding today is a little bit different, and this was one of the questions that, kindly you sent it through. You're a professional. And so I sat with it and I was like, man, what is culture? Because today I think it's a little different. Back in the day, I would say culture sort of was the people who understood that there was a like vision, that were trying to get to a goal, not even knowing exactly what the target was. But it was sort of like us. It's sort of that moment of like identifying a tribe, like who are the people that want better for each other and therefore themselves at the same time. They're along for the ride, but they're willing to invest the time, energy, and passion, whatever their craft was. Whether it was on the mic or lighting tech or a stylist or a photographer or videographer, we were all investing our time for the greater good of the movement. And it didn't have to be about us. I think culture today there's a lot of sort of rogue elements that you can't say is not part of the culture. But right now, I love what's happening with like the creators, the doers, the engine of this movement that still believe in the core values of what this culture has always stood for, which is a voice of the people, like the rebellion, the moment of like, look, let me tell you how I really do feel. Like, I'm not just going to go along with it. This is how hip hop sort of shifts and moves and allows you to feel it from different perspectives, And I think it's regionally, there's different sort of goals of what they're trying to share. But, so back then, us is what culture was, because you identified your crew and you ran with it and you invested and you gave your heart and soul. Today, I think culture is really like the doers, the makers, the creators. That's who I'm really standing with, and certainly believe that that's, the core essence of what the culture is today are the people that are actually creating. But without the buyers and the consumers and the followers and the people testing and poking at that, sort of the people in those top positions and like keeping them sharp, I don't think we have a full understanding of what the culture is. So I think it's like expanded, but there's a lot of branches to what culture is today, which is some of which I claim and some of which is just so counterintuitive to actually the betterment of us, of the people that want more out of life, that want a better way of being, of existing, of connecting, of communicating. And I think some of it is really out of line right now.
And I'm looking forward to touching on a little bit of that. And, in your breakdown of the timing of the definitions changing for you of culture, in the first instance, you gave the notion of a destination, which is so awesome, right? And a destination that we didn't know what it was or what it was going to be. We were just creating like the creators are that you're talking about now, which is interesting. So in an effort to talk about a destination, tell a little bit more about your story and how you've come to this destination now of where you are. Obviously, knowing you very well, know a lot of it, but I wanted you to share with others a little bit about your story.
Sure. Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, went to a Jesuit high school, went to Kenyon College, studied psychology and art. In high school and college, 88, 89, I was in sort of this, we're seeking, we're young men. We want the answers to life or answers to the questions just of, what to do, how to do it, who am I? And I think in that moment, my entire journey growing up in the 80s was about music. And so then I was on this sort of, Depeche Mode alternative kind of kick. But then Big Daddy Kane comes along, and the DOC and Ice-T, Slick Rick. And I'm like, what is that? 88, 89, beautiful years in music. Historically, everybody do your research, go back to the greatest albums that were dropped in 89. And it's like really
That's a big conversation too. The year that had top albums. I think 94 is another one, but go ahead.
Yeah. 96, I would say too, but 89, 93, 98, phenomenal year. So I fell in love with it. And for me, I think at that point I was able to just study it, absorb it, participate, play it in the car, throw parties, play that music, whether that was, at college, it was De La Soul, it was Tribe Called Quest, it was Delight, it was just great music. Like, again, another great year, sort of in the early 90s, late 80s. But I brought that knowledge. I really kind of studied it. And, because I couldn't contribute to it. I mean, I'm in the middle of nowhere, Kenyon College. I mean, just oldest school in Ohio. Like, there was no stoplight in our town. So, like, this wasn't the hub of urban, sort of activity. Right, at all. But we were the ones that sort of brought, people are pumping Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Grateful Dead out on the quad. And I'm pumping Boogie Down Productions, you know what I mean? Sort of the live album, So, like, I was sort of, man, we're going to let it known that this is really exciting stuff, man. Phenomenal music. So I really fell in love with it, took a deep dive. In 93, I graduated and had an opportunity to move to New York and did just that. I accepted a position with Richard Avedon. My commitment was a year. For those that don't know, he's sort of the Michael Jordan of photography. It'd be like learning under a master, one of the top 5 portrait photographers of all time ever to touch a camera.
Wow.
That was my first job out of school. From there, I'm in New York City and I'm feeling the pulse of 1993 New York, and it's Wu-Tang, and it's, just all the phenomenal music that's happening. Ill Al, Scratch, Blase, like, we're taking deep dives, and I find myself working during the day and in the clubs at night, right? And so being a photographer, working for a photographer, I'm walking with the camera. And that sort of began this identifying sort of the major characters that were, sort of dropping albums or were making waves, or, the undercurrent of this guy's coming, like show up at D&D Studios, meet Premier, meet Jazzo, take a couple of pictures, Mad Lion. Like, you're in this scene where it's just sort of all coming at you. There's no security. So, it's hand-to-hand combat in some ways. Like, hey, Jonathan Mannion, I'm a photographer. It's no like, I'm going to hit him on a DM, see if he hits back. It's like, you're there. Like, here's my business card, comp card. I brought my portfolio that weighs a ton. It's in my backpack. Do you want to see it? Oh, man, this is dope. You should show up here. I'm doing something else. So you're building this momentum based on a willingness to be of service to something that you are passionate about. And I think that's really the way that I separated myself from everything that was happening, because there was a deep knowledge that I had sort of invested my soul in, playing the music, doing college radio, understanding all the music that came in. So it's not a fake it till you make it. It's to understand it so you can actually speak to it, have deep conversations, meaningful conversations about music, about vision, and then to be able to articulate how to get somebody in front of my lens to their ideal self. Like, what is the message that you want to give and convey to the world about who you are, what you stand for, where you came from? So then I realized in that moment that it was about storytelling. And I was off to the races.
Off to the races. And, I've had the pleasure of knowing you from the early 90s, where I believe we met literally at a Nas cover photo shoot for The Source. And since that moment,
that's incredible.
No, listen. And
I looked through that shoot the other day.
Say it again?
I said I looked through that photo session the other day.
How crazy is that,
Foxy,
right?
AZ, Nori, Nature.
That's right.
Nas
That's right.
Brothers, like,
It's crazy. And since that moment, I saw the what I call masterful eye and approach that you had to capturing cultural icons and adding even a further dimension to them, which you've kind of alluded to. And so this gift of capturing culture, I think, has definitely positioned you as a significant part of shaping the visual of this impactful culture that we've created. And with that being said, over the years, was there a particular moment when you realized how big and instrumental this music, sport, entertainment, and fashion culture was to overall culture as we know it today?
Yeah, I mean, people talked a lot about pop culture before, right? And what pop culture was just popular stuff thrown in your face at all times. I think that sort of hip hop culture or the culture sort of at large, I think we just sort of like took over that position and tipped the scales because it was undeniable that what we were doing was so cool. you know, like, certainly I think that the artists led the way early on. The artists were the ones like, wait, what's that about? Like Foxy Brown is doing something and she's sexy, but she's talking a lot of shit. Like, but backing it up and looks fly, like, okay. And Jay and Nas and Babe and Puff. Puff's talking big because you learn from, the giants of Heavy D, Andre Harrell, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like he's learning the business, but also ready to amplify what he loved about what he understood, uh, throwing colleges on his campus, very different kind of worlds and different trajectory, but I think it's rooted in the same love. So, was there one specific moment? I think there's a couple, and I can't sort of define it by like, I was on 145th Street and this
Right.
popped into my head. I can't really go exactly there, but there was an understanding that I wanted or I was able to get complete coverage, right? As long as somebody was alive, I feel like I'm going to get to this person. I want a conversation with the most meaningful voices of this movement, whether it was Outkast in Atlanta, Snoop in LA, Scarface in Houston, Kanye when he came in Chicago, so how do I get to everybody? Because it's not a survey and it's not like collecting baseball cards or anything like that, but it was like, how does it different? How does it sharpen me to understand what's happening in Memphis, to then bring St. Louis to the world in an authentic way, that to go back to New York and realize how different each of these worlds are and what's important to the receiving audience of this music that's happening in these pockets around the nation. But then through the vision and a consistent eye, I'm able to kind of give like one voice and one sort of meaningful translation, if you will, of what's happening in each of these places. Authentically, I want to bring you the exact story. So like, how do I go way deeper than a surface scratch of like, I got this person in front of my lens. He's wearing pink. I'm going to put him on a pink backdrop. Like, that's cool. To like, yo, where did you go to school? Where did you get in your first fight? Beanie Siegel in Philly. I was like, yo, where'd you get in your first fight? Did you win? Like I'm asking different questions to get to more meaningful images ultimately, because when it means something to the individuals in front of my lens, it's going to mean something more because authentically they're going to go through a real set of emotions. I give the example of I can put you on any steps, but if I put you on your grandmother's steps of your house where she was giving you cornrows when you were little and you hated it because it hurt so bad you had a headache for hours afterwards, it's going to mean more because it's connected now to memory. So like, there is a moment that you realize you're creating memories that are meaningful ones for the artist first, to then walk those steps, or translating where they would like to be. Like, hey, I don't know how to get there, but here's what I want to do with this, or here's what I'm trying to say. How do you translate that visually and get me to that answer that they might not even know how to achieve?
Right. And what's so crazy is I'm listening to you. I never would have thought, and many would assume that as a photographer, it's not necessarily so much about the questions you're asking to bring out of them, but more so the settings you're putting them in. But you so eloquently made it very clear on getting those questions and those answers puts them in the place that you visually are going to capture them in, which is so profound. And it's even for me just now, I'm like, wow, from a layman's eye, somebody who's not the amazing photographer, I'm thinking it's all set up on the scenario and the situation you're putting them in, not necessarily the questions and the emotion that you're evoking to whether get them to go to that place, or while they're in a place exuding that emotion that you definitely capture in the camera.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a big compliment. You know what I mean? To like, people don't stop and really think, because like not everybody gets led into the process of creation, you know?
That's
So
right.
they're just like, they just see the person on this side, like that's a picture of Andre 3000 and it's fly because he looks fly. What did it take to get there? You know? What did it
Mm.
take to get DMX in a pool of blood? You know,
Listen,
it's very
that
funny.
is that one of your most iconic? Is that probably one of your most
I think it
iconic?
is. I mean, one of the most, definitely. The
Right.
most, you could make a big argument for that.
That's right. Because
You
you
know,
got a couple of
because
those. We're gonna talk about some
yeah,
in a little bit.
no, please,
And
man. I love talking about X, man.
no,
He was a very, very special human being
I'm sure.
in this industry, on this planet, as a human.
That's right. That's right. And you've seen, you talked about hip hop, and you've seen the evolution of hip hop culture literally through your lens and through your overall love, which we all see and feel, and appreciation for it. What has been the biggest change that you've witnessed, and what's the biggest opportunity you see for the further evolution of it?
Sure. I think the biggest change that I have noticed, certainly, it's a lot of time. You know, 3 decades is a lot of time. There's definitely
Yeah.
going to be changes. You could probably break down changes per 5 years, per decade, but I'll take it generally. And I touched on it, I think, in your first question. You know, I think there was an understanding that we were all trying to identify sort of maybe the misfits, the people that didn't quite go together as white, black, Asian, Jewish. Like, yo, we're just sort of don't fit in. We love
Mm.
this music. We don't quite fit into a standard issue way of being. How do we unite, and like, how are we kind of stronger together? It's that mentality of like, put the differences aside. Let's get to the goal. Let's get to where we're trying to be. And I think it was a unified front in a lot of ways, and it took everybody's puzzle piece to allow some singular person to shine. And I think
Mm.
that's really huge, because yes, it's led by maybe a love of the music, a love of what a certain artist is doing. I think you rise to a different occasion, you know, you rise to, well, yeah, different occasion, I suppose, shooting somebody like Nas, because he's been thorough for a long time. Like, wow, I have an opportunity to now put my vision to collaborate with this brilliant mind to even elevate farther his own being, but also to kind of to come along for the ride. Like, I think there's something really special about that. But ultimately, you're there to show up every day to bring everybody to their ideal self that they may or may not have met yet. Right. So,
Yeah, and as I'm listening to you, you definitely see that there's the power of an image to shape perceptions and influence culture is undeniable. And you were kind of just talking about all the different types of people. And how do you feel like your work as a photographer contributes to broader conversations and narratives surrounding representation, diversity, and identity? You kind of alluded to it a little bit just now, and it's even more so ringing in the front of my head on just how powerful an image can be to help with some of those narratives.
yeah, it's funny. Like, there's so many tangents to kind of go down as we speak about this. And I realize I kind of didn't answer your last question, like the difference between early on and afterwards. And I'm famous for that. And I'm really sorry. My mind
No,
goes like
please.
a
No,
million
this is
miles an
great.
hour in a million different ways. But, I think the difference was we were a unified front early on. I find
Mhm.
that over time, people felt like they just, in some ways, it's great because people felt like they wanted to separate themselves from maybe a core group of people that they were around. They wanted to do it by themselves. So I feel like it's like, yeah, I don't need those guys. I'm just going to go do my own thing, So I think it became a more singular journey at some point, right? And then maybe, I don't know whether that's like selfish or just the vibes become more pure. You're on the fence, and I think it's artist per artist, right?
Mhm.
But that desire to go for self, I think was sort of the biggest change that I noticed, some of which is really positive because it allows for a different brand of music to come out. Maybe it's Andre 3000 who was like, man, I want to go so far in the left field that Big, you gotta let me go. And he's already in left field, so he wanted to go farther.
Right.
That's why they complemented each other beautifully as our class. But those voices, they need to be heard as well to allow people coming behind to understand that they can take it to the farthest points, like to that tipping point of the edge, where it's like, maybe it's a little too far. We'll go, man. Test those borders. So,
Push it.
That's sort of the biggest change. And then obviously now there's many conversations about, sort of greed and, just these hollow contributions that get into the bag, which is like, it's tough to endure, but I think that's going to happen too, So
No, it comes with the
that's the
territory.
negative side of things, which I don't like to
Listen, everything has its pros and its cons. And like I said, since you want to go back and answer the first one, then the follow-up on the image piece, that, the power of images and how that contributes to kind of broader conversations around narratives surrounding representation, diversity, and identity. I'd love to get your thoughts on how you see that, you playing a role within that with the type of images that you capture.
Well, I think it comes down to communication now, right? And I always wanted to say, to tell or to say or to create an authentic delivery of that human being, which takes a lot. It does take going to deeper levels. You can walk in thinking you know somebody, right? And say, this is what I think, and this is what I want you to do. And they're not feeling it. And they're going to give a version of themselves that is such a thin delivery of their humanity and their being and their essence and their excellence, that it's sort of like when you look, I think the real thinkers, the critical thinkers that are looking at photos on a deeper level can see that right away. Like, yes, that is that person in that shot, but it's not giving anything to me, right? So this is where you get to a deeper understanding of somebody by having this conversation. I think, I look back at sort of one of my biggest gifts, and it was taking psychology. Like, how do I get to those answers? How do I reveal maybe something of this person that they've not given to anybody else? Certainly that's great as a photographer because you don't want a picture that looks like everybody else. But I think this is where you get to an understanding, right? And it's a constantly evolving thing, I mean, at a basic level, just having pronouns that you have to be identified by. Yeah, I'm not of a generation where there was a they. There may have been days, but so you communicate with people like, hey man, tell me what that is about. Or, hey, they, like, you don't want to offend anybody and you're trying to learn constantly. And I think that that's always at the core of getting to those answers is really sinking into the questions, living the questions, and asking them and being brave enough and being vulnerable enough to put yourself out there, but led with gratitude and kindness. I think you can really get to a deep understanding of somebody and therefore can translate their being for the rest of the world and to give the subtleties of behavior per person that's going to hit somebody in a beautiful way to inspire them to be their greatest selves. So
listen, you just hit on so much right there, and it's been so evident in your work for years. You said the authentic delivery of their being. And I literally remember you gifting me with some pieces. One was your iconic Kevin Garnett image when he was under the basketball rim. So powerful because it truly captured.
That was a great
his
shoot.
bold persona.
Phenomenal human being.
Listen, but it's everything that you were just saying about authentic delivery of their being. You also, so now that's one spectrum. You also gave me a piece from a trip to Jamaica, I think, where you captured some kids who lived out there and who you were able to capture an image of them all, every one of them.
9 of them.
Most genuine smiles. And thank you.
Count
9 of them, right?
I know the image. Yeah, I know the image. That was in Craigtown. I was photographing Beanie Man.
But the joy that they had in those genuine smiles that you captured, that you never would have thought of, they would have had it given where they lived. Correct. How are you able to tap into this craft and pull these things out? And how can you tap it? How can we really tap into pulling that level of joy from those who seemingly have way more than any of those young men did where they lived?
Well, you gave a perfect example. I mean, you look at Kevin Garnett, who just got a deal for 128 million as, straight out of high school. Like,
Yeah.
this is a dude who was like on top of the world in that moment. I photographed him at his house, and so like within that moment, like you should be super joyful at that moment. You just got it all, man. Like you just got all the answers. But he was happy. He was joyful. He did go to the places like, that, that we discussed, and like, hey man, I'm going to climb up on top of your room and I'm going to shoot down. I want to get a different angle. Like, I want to get it that like, it's all up above you still to go. You're growing into this rare air. After signing this deal, now you have the ability to now float and to really rise. So he was joyful. I think he, walks with an immense amount of gratitude. And I will add this in. If you take a bad picture of Kevin Garnett, you should turn in your camera, because that dude is beautiful. Like, going crazy, but man, like what a phenomenal human being to photograph. And thankfully, I think I rose to the occasion and gave some beautiful answers each time we worked together. And a great soul. So that's what I have to say about Kevin Garnett. But, so the counterpoint is Jamaica. You have these kids barefoot in Craigtown, Jamaica, right? And I was given the gift of freedom, right? Basically, I said, you're having lunch, or Beanie Man, like, yeah, I don't want to bother you during lunch. I don't want to get you, sort of chewing food. It's not really what we're here to do. I'm going to give you a break, but am I good? Can I just go and float around and see what I see? And I saw these kids being intrigued by what I was doing. And I was like, this is a moment that you might plant a seed to show one of these kids a different way of being, right? They're looking at the shoot. They're witnessing it all. It's probably seared in a lot of their brains as they've grown up, and Beanie Man rises as well. Like, man, I was in Craigtown. I remember this photographer, this white boy came into Craigtown, was shooting up this stuff, and then we chased him around. And then he turned the camera on us, to be able to give us a moment to make us feel special. Like they were the ones in the spotlight, and I think that inclusion and to realize this isn't about taking photos. This is about giving photos. This is about giving memories. This is about achieving, honoring sort of the beauty of what that access is to an area that not a lot of people get a chance to roam around. Like Beanie Man said, go on, man, you're Teflon. I was like, oh, man, come on. Like, I was like, you really did that? He's like, man, go on, man, go so. And so I cashed it in, man, and I got beautiful pictures. And, these are almost like diary memories of me. I don't write a lot of stuff down, but, through that picture, I can take you to the exact moment, to the exact feeling. One of the kids had a roller skate around his neck. Like, I just remember the image. Certainly it's seared in my brain, but these are unforgettable moments. And that picture certainly is one of my favorite of all time. And I would beg that you show it when we do the visual version of this for the people, so they can understand what it means to have nothing, but to absolutely have everything, because they're living, man, they're living, and they're happy with what they have, man. And that gratitude goes a long way.
To have nothing but really have everything is exactly it. And it's that core value of joy that you brought out, and is such a great lesson for all of us. And another thing that I think you show is this level of humility. And when I talk about humility, not thinking less of yourself, but it's about thinking of yourself less, which is what you did in that moment. You did that in that moment. And who knows the trajectory of the lives you might have changed in that moment with any of those youth, but more importantly, the lives that can be changed by just viewing those images. It's so powerful, so powerful.
No,
and
man,
so
I think photographers deserve a lot of credit, the ones that are investing their soul into what they're doing. And I think you look back at, the greats of, Danny Lyons or Jim Marshall, like these are people that invested their entire being in translating what they were so passionate about with a skill set to match, like, man, such a win when the talent matches the passion. then you can really like explore the contents of your dreams and really
That's right.
let things fly. Um, so
With
I,
that
I
being,
salute all photographers, man, really putting the work in.
no,
Not the
I
ones
love that.
copying, but yeah,
I
it's
love that.
major because I think there's challenges that photographers experience. I mean, it's throughout time. You look at Lynn Goldsmith and the Warhol estate. It's like we're fighting for our vision and to not be like a template for others to trace. Like we're an original thought that like is a gift to the world. It is our art form, and you know, I think look, that's a discussion that requires another 3 or 4 hours. But
No, and we can
it's a big nod
do
to
a little part
photographers.
two.
I see you. I'm ready for part two whenever.
I love it. And, I think that's a great segue into, you talk about the value of even Black culture as we know it. And it's often something that's been borrowed and appropriated or used to inspire other cultures and industries. I would love to get your thoughts on the importance of Black ownership and recognition of what it is that the Black community has brought to the world.
Look, this was a question that I really was a deep one to digest. This is one that again is probably version 3, or sort of podcast number 3. But this is the one that was really deep to me, right? Because I think there does need to be a huge nod of thanks and gratitude for centuries of the inspiration that Black people have brought to this world. It's not in the last couple of years because people tap dance well, it's like, this is like people carving masks in the middle of Africa as ceremonial sort of worship moments. I mean, it ties into something so much deeper that has inspired, Romare Bearden and I mean, so many people, just what they pull from different cultures. I mean, we touch on culture, like this is real culture now. This goes into small, meaningful, like, again, I say ceremonial, but it's like artistic creations of the most talented beings, right? Throughout time. I think there's no way possible to not acknowledge and really take your hats off to everybody who's contributed in such a way to inspire not only this generation and like a cute McDonald's commercial, but it goes way deeper than that. I mean, it's movement. And I think people are really pointing it out these days and doing a deep dive, right? It wasn't just created, for like, oh, wow, Target came up with something cool. No, go back. Okay, go deeper. Okay, now go deeper. Okay, that's where it comes from, So I think people are not just accepting the surface level, like, oh, that's cool, or I know where that came from. It came from like 10 years ago. This other photographer did it. But where did that photographer get his or her inspiration from? It goes so far, man. And anybody studying, sort of art throughout time, I think is really pulling from so much inspiration that has been delivered, and it's such a broad question that even this answer doesn't feel meaningful enough. But I certainly owe a debt of gratitude, for all of my references go way deeper. They're sort of like postcards from, I'm in France and in Paris and in this African store, and there's some postcards, and I'm like studying this and absorbing every moment of some photographer who took the time, like Sadie Keita, who was shooting parties, just that inspiration of people gathering authentically when the cameras are off, when no one was watching. What were people doing? They were engaging with each other. And I think that is just even a rule of a reminder to like communicate and to really be present and to be, sort of humble, to give all that you have, but to be humble, to really realize that, there's other sources that this comes from, but also to acknowledge what your contribution is to it, to elevate it, but
It feels like,
everybody wants acknowledgement, and I think that, but I think that there really does need to take a deep dive beyond what somebody is doing to interpret something that's already been done. That's probably even been done before that. It's going deeper into the roots of creativity that really come from some phenomenal phenomenal sources.
So because I look at the entertainment industry as a dynamic and ever evolving, area, and I'm listening to some of the things that you're saying, and I'm thinking that these may be some of the elements of how you adopt your photography style to kind of stay relevant and reflective of the changing cultural and artistic landscape. Is that true, or are there other elements that you incorporate to make sure you kind of stay in that space of relevance of capturing?
I think a lot of it is like I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly pushing myself to go deeper. Like there's a set of, um, you can't really say a formula, but I walk into a situation knowing sort of what I need. After 30 years, you should walk in like, I need that, this. I think they told me they want that. I'm going to do that and this, right? There's some sort of formula, right? But what you bring can't be formulaic. It can't just be like, oh yeah, we've seen that before. And I think as an artist, you constantly challenge yourself to go to another level. Like, I don't want to do what I've done before. I want to do what's next. Right. And I think it ties back into that communication. What's the story that you want to tell today? And how do I bring you to that? How do I bring you to your ideal self? And I think that that's part of uh, the required work when doing a job. And I think it does mean that you stay relevant because of that, because you do connect authentically to what that person wants. And I think it's why I will always be applicable to any job and any person beyond music, because like, I want to know what makes that person move, what inspires them, what makes them sad, how do I get to bring you through my vision to the world? And how do you see that photo and say, yeah, that's the person I see in the mirror when I wake up? That's one of the biggest compliments I've ever received. Like, I look at your pictures, man, and that's who I see. That's the person I see. Right. But it's a heightened version. It's like, I want to bring somebody to the best version without bringing them outside of themselves. Or it's like, it's cool. I like my styling, but I'd never really do that. Like, I want to keep people to the best version of themselves, again, whether they met them or not, in order to, sort of bring that to the world. So that's always the goal. And I think that'll keep you at least sharp.
Sharp. Right. And being a sponge, you said it.
Trends change. And there's some of it that I know is not me. You know what I mean? Like, I love how clothes look and how they make people feel, but clothes for clothes' sake, it's why I didn't really go into fashion, because it's just not what makes me move. And that's okay, because it makes somebody else move. And it's the only thing that makes them move. And they really care about the movement or a crepe pattern of, Yamamoto piece, right? You know what I mean? Like some of the sculptural elements that like Irving Penn was shooting way back when, like these beautiful structural things. So, it's not for everybody. And I think there's a lot of different lanes of photography that you can go down.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I think social media now plays a big part of that, right? And that's inspired.
People talk about this social media thing, but I haven't really heard about it.
How about that? Yeah, I mean, because if you look at it, it's inspired a new generation of photography and getting your vision out to the world, right? So, do you think the amount of access of noise created by social media has helped or kind of hurt the overall craft?
Boy, it depends on the hour that you ask me this question. How
about that?
Look, I think some of it is phenomenal, because it has allowed this culture to become more connected. It has allowed beautiful references to kind of come into somebody's field of vision that might lead to further exploration, right? Because it's every time something goes out there, if you're paying attention to it, some of the more popular things, it's the shot heard around the world. Like, everybody's getting it in real time. Japan is, London, Paris, Nigeria, South Africa, Jamaica, everything in real time. Boom. Wow, that just dropped right now. It's a different time for each of you. But there's something that connects us all and maybe makes us stronger, because we're all kind of like seeing the same influences at the same time. I think it can also be a little bit of a problem, because everybody is looking at the same resources and nobody's going deeper. Like, there was real exploration when social media didn't exist. You weren't just able to like scroll. I like one like that, I'm going to do one like that. The drop and drag, like photo references. Okay, I'm just going to copy these 10 pictures that I copied off of somebody else. Like, what happens when you actually have to do research and you're studying voodoo in Haiti, in order to bring some sort of like mysterious, sort of otherworldly connection to the spiritual realm for an artist, maybe like DMX. And it was one of my deep dives when I was doing Flesh on My Flesh, and there's images to support it, not that have been seen, but maybe on this podcast we'll share one. But it's what I don't like is I don't like the comparison that happens now. I think it makes people feel really messed up. Because people are presenting a life that may not be their actual life. And, and part of that's great because maybe they're aspiring to be that person. And so they're speaking it into existence through the photos. All right, I'll give you that, but I think comparison, I think, is just the worst, man. When you can just stand on your own 2 feet, be an individual, and really deliver your special brand of magic that is uniquely yours. You're the best at being you. And we want that, and just for somebody to not look either way, just go with like soul and the vision and what compels you sort of forward to create. I think that really makes it a much more exciting experience to see artists really purely creating from within versus I'm going to make a piece like this because I think somebody might want it, right? And I think that's where we get into problem, like social media, where there are issues and it's making people feel crazy, including me. Like you're comparing, like, oh man, that person got that job. Why did that person get that job? I deserve that job. Or man, I did 5 album covers for that too, but now he's gone a different way. Like, oh man, I feel well, maybe I'm done, and it like mentally, it's hard for an adult who's fully formed to process some of these little nuances of business, let alone a 12-year-old kid that's trying to figure it out. A 14-year-old girl who's like, oh, well, I have to look like this. And I don't have, a booty. I'm going to go buy one. I'm going to like, it leads to so much craziness.
It's a lot.
So like, I feel, well, I just had a son. He's 1 year old. He's not on social media yet. There's one post, and it's like his hand. And I it is a very conscious choice not to bring him into that space, and hopefully that space is sort of like calibrated over time, right? It's hard for these kids, and you see it. You see it through statistics. You see it through addiction. You see it through just mental health issues. And I think we have a big job as a culture to kind of help this next generation navigate. You do a beautiful job. I know, I see your daughter playing tennis. You know what I mean? I see your likes of all that. Just in it, doing things that are actually really beautiful gifts of like mental toughness of you versus yourself, even though you're playing somebody else. Like sports and athletics, I think is phenomenal. Playing soccer is great teamwork, makes the dream work kind of vibes. I think that there's something, just health is wealth in general, right? To get back to some of those core elements that we grew up with, like you're begging kids to get outside for 60 minutes to get off their devices.
Which is crazy.
Go outside. It's so awesome.
Yeah. It's a different, you're right. It's a different time.
Social media, I think in that capacity is pretty challenging for this next generation. I think it's a good tool. I think it was a good tool, but now it's really clicky. Look at me, kind of, I'm on the next private jet with the next champagne. I posted yesterday with a Band-Aid on my thumb with a plastic cup. I was in first class. I was still able to say I'm in 1F. So I was still playing the game, but not playing the game, trying to just give a little perspective of, man, it's really not the things, man. It's what you do. It's who you are. It's how you treat people. It's how grateful you are. It's how you connect. People are hurting out here, man. And to get back to real live human communication is essential for us to dive into.
Well, let me ask you this then. What aspirations do you have for your photography and your approach and your ability to identify these challenges? Like, what do you want to do or going to do to kind of help with this, given your craft and your art form, which can be a part of the solution, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think certainly one, it's moving into a role of a mentor. Like there's
Mm,
nothing, no like tricks of the trade that I'm not willing to share with somebody who really actually wants it. Not just somebody who wants the answers to get to the bag, right? There are people that really want it because they want to understand it for themselves, to translate some of the goodness, to really sponge up some of the wisdom. I have gained a lot of wisdom in 30 years,
mhm.
from really painful experiences and really joyful ones. So the highs and the lows of running your own business, of being a freelance person, eating what you kill kind of is the mentality, but like to give that, to be able to strengthen the next generation and give them technical tools to allow them to avoid some of those speed bumps or potholes or brick walls that you run into. I think being a mentor and giving of yourself in that way, I think is really important for, the OGs. It's the, how much is enough? You have enough now? Can you give some back?
That's right.
Great. Let's give back. Right. And it's always been part of sort of my makeup, whether it's teaching at SVA or ICP, or, lecturing or just motivating in general. There's people that hit me up constantly that, hey man, I think you might have this answer. Would you talk to this guy? Somebody at a company used one of the photos and I'm trying to give him some guidance and he's all bent out of shape. It's like, okay, let's breathe through it. Let's walk through it. How do we get to our answers? How can we be clear with this company that that is not how we're going to get down? This is how we make our living, right? Is
Mhm.
part of it. Like they get to look phenomenal, but if we own the photos, then we should be able to self-sign our prints and license the photo. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right. So the gift of
it's part of how we
availability is
keep our
big for you.
lights on, right? Availability and mentorship and trying to, uh, I guess, communicate some of the challenges that they will likely face, right? Maybe not the exact ones, but similar, right? So that's one. Two, I protected the work for a really long time, right? I felt like it was a duty, it was a responsibility to protect, to let out the images that these artists want out there for a magazine or for an album or personal shoots or whatever. And so I protected it, right? Because I didn't want somebody stealing it and then going to sort of monetize my work and their sort of likeness and their being, this collaborative work that we made together. So I protected it for a really long time, right? I'm still protecting it, but right now I want to kind of push it all back in. I want to use it as a 30-year delivery of a career, but 50 years of hip hop. Because when I jumped in '93, I went forward and backwards at the same time, right? So I went back to the DOC and Kane and Grandmaster Flash and Cool Herc and Africa Bambaataa, Slick Rick. Like, there's amazing images that I was creating early on. But again, I was also rising with the people that were emerging, the Ja Rules and the Nelly and the, 50 Cent. And just like, I was moving again forward and backwards. And then there was overlap. And sometimes it was old school week. And sometimes it was a new school sort of emergence of like, hey, you want to shoot this new guy Ludacris? Well, he has one album out, but he's dope. Like, oh, all right, yeah, let's go to Atlanta. Let's go. And you build these relationships again with people. So it is now time to give that work back. It is time to show it as an example of a body of work that was something that I really, again, passionately delivered to the individual projects. But now, collectively, I think it's going to be phenomenal as we look back. Not a 50-year hip hop celebration, which is
Right. Right.
fantastic that we've made it this far, but there's a lot of surface deliveries of like just being part of the conversation. Like, well, shit, we better do this because hip hop's a big deal. Okay, we'll just do this.
Right.
Like,
Right.
well, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's a nice nod. I want to go deeper. So I'm letting everybody have the year. And there's been phenomenal deliveries, Yankee Stadium a bunch of weeks ago.
Incredible.
Phenomenal. But even still, it's like having seen each of them in the humble beginnings with maybe a little more passion or a little more sort of effort or energy. It's hard to absorb in Yankee Stadium. You realize you're in an amazing arena,
That's
but
right.
maybe a club performance might have been more passionate, or you got some sweat dripped on you. Slick Rick's jewelry actually hits you in the on the side of your head or something. Like, yeah, these are experiences and memories that you kind of take with you. So, um, I'm really, really excited to give the stories because I realize that that's what people want from me now. Like,
Yeah,
what was the last photo shoot with Aaliyah like? There were no cameras there. There was no social
right.
media. Nobody was posting. Nobody knows what happened behind the scenes. I know, and I'm here to tell you. And that's what I'm really most excited about. It has really reinvigorated me. And you can look past some of the nonsense that happens in business and in, you know, in this industry, you know what I mean? As everybody's trying to has their own desires of what they want for themselves. That's fantastic. You know, like you're gonna deal with, you know, with challenges that come your way. But like this has given me kind of a real grounded desire to go touch people uh
No,
appropriately in
right.
arenas where I'm like, yo, let me tell you, I'm excited to tell you what happened. Like, do you want to know the formula of DMX in the blood? Cool. I'm here to tell you. I brought the prop stylist. I brought him with me. I flew him in from LA. Tell the people what it was in. You know, like
Right.
I want to have meaningful deliveries of people that seek the answers to sharpen their own skills to be able to deliver the next wave of meaningful work to the world.
And dog, that you are a true steward of your gift by now being so intentional and focused on sharing components of it that can help benefit others and their ability to tap into their gifts and
Mhm.
take this culture moving forward. This is like the epitome of the essence of this platform is what you just walked through
Man,
and did and what you're going to do, and then we're gonna do the recap of that next year
yeah.
to be
Oh
able to
man.
show how you took everything that you just said and gave that, whether you want to call it behind the curtain look or that
Yeah.
deeper understanding of all these amazing moments that you've been a part of and captured, but give the depth of it. And that essence of sharing is such a huge gift that I'm thanking you now. I'm thanking you now for that.
You're
And
welcome.
in the
Now and for the last decades that we've known each other, you're welcome, man. I've been working for people like you because I know you're doing the equal parallel work in your own arena
that's right. No,
to
thank you, thank you.
to bring people
And,
up. You know, it's
and,
true.
and as I look at this theme of sharing, I'd love for you to share 3 seeds that you would want to leave to the stewards of culture moving forward. What are the 3 things that Jonathan Mannion thinks these are the things that I think are going to be most important to really shape, mold, and nurture culture moving forward?
Yeah. Well, look, it's it was part of my three already, but I feel like you just touched on being intentional. Like be intentional, like really, really like this is what I want. This is what I want to feel like. This is what I want it to mean. Like so you're not phoning it in. So like being intentional with whatever gifts that you're sharing or whatever work that you're creating. Um, it's a nice tie into your last statement and sort of a delivery that's a really meaningful number one on my list of three. Um, stay individually creative, like within yourself, like to create, to challenge yourself to just make something beautiful that is really, uh, an important delivery from the soul. Again, it's like we want to see the work that's not somebody else's work that you've copied. That's cool. That's a good exercise. Everybody's
Right.
done that, including me, but I look back on it and it's the least important work because it's somebody else's. And I think given time, the fullness of time, you'll realize that copying somebody else's stuff is really not yours at all.
Mm.
So being individual um, with your creativity and really, sinking your soul into what it is that you're making, we want those unique voices to really shine. And then gratitude, man. It's like
Yeah.
you don't have to have this breath. Like look, there's a lot of people who have been called home. There's a lot of people that went early, like the perfect example. And it's sad, sadly, it was only a few days ago when Aaliyah, uh, what, 22 years ago, is that possible? 2001
How about
was
that?
was called home too early. I mean, it's insane. But that always stood to me as an example of like, oh, if she could go, we can all go.
Yep.
If she was needed and called home, oh man, I don't want to say I'm way worse than her,
Right.
but like I've done some scandalous things. Everybody has. It's like, yo, she was such a light, such a talent. But I always look to that as a reminder of like, man, be really grateful. Like, yo, spend the time, like sit in what you're doing in a way that there's a deep understanding that it can all be taken very quickly. And we've lost a lot of people. And I think that that's a constant reminder to, one, to motivate, to get your ass in gear and go make the work and don't procrastinate. Stop comparing yourself and get to work and put in the hard work. And it really is hard work, you know, and that's the way you, I think, get to those answers. But, you know, again, to go back to number 3, then to just be grateful, man. Have gratitude as you walk, and treat people with kindness. And that's part of the gratitude, like being kind to people, because people are hurting, man, and they may not show it. And check on the strong ones, man, and be grateful that they're in your life too. So, you know, intention, gratitude, and individual creativity. Those are the 3, in any particular order, man.
And you nailed the why behind all of them and the gratitude. And I'm going to show gratitude for you, and for what you've done and what you're going to continue to do. I thank you for being a vessel of being open to sharing your gift, to the level in which you are. And God has blessed you with this for years and is going to continue to bless and evolve your offering moving forward. But I want to give you a sincere thank you, and show my gratitude for you as a person, as an artist, and as a vessel of purpose that you were shining, my friend. And I appreciate you.
Amen. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you appreciate it. It's wonderful when it happens from one of your peers, where you actually feel like, oh, wow, okay. You know, you need one of these every once in a while.
That's right.
You know, there's a lot of people that love to throw the rocks, you know, and love to tell you about yourself. But when it comes from somebody as grounded and as purposeful as I know you walk this earth, to hear those words and to hear just a general appreciation that you feel seen in a very long journey that has had ups and downs, you know, it means the world. And I appreciate you, man. And thank you for having me on to share a little something, man. And look forward to round 2 and round 3.
That's right. We got rounds because we're just getting started, bro. We're just getting started. I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah. Anytime, brother.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.